Morning, Jeff. Morning.
Good morning, Alan.
We are starting Update Brazil episode 4. So I would like to welcome Jim Simpson in his amazing book, Red and Green Axis. But first of all, I would like to say good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Alan. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Jeff. Morning, Alan. Good to be with you guys.
The topic this morning, of course, is Jim Simpson's new book, The Red-Green Axis, Refugees, Immigration, and the Agenda to Erase America. So this is quite topical. Jim, you're like clairvoyant. Did you know this big refugee crisis was going to hit before you started writing it?
Just really good timing. I'd like to say I was clairvoyant, but that I'd be lying.
Yeah, it's this book is scary because so many things in the world don't make sense. You know, political correctness, multiculturalism, why is gay marriage such a big thing, you know? And then you find out, you pick up this book and, you know, you always wonder, you think, why are we taking in all these people? What is this about? And lo and behold, I read Jim's book and here's what it looks like here. And all of a sudden, it's all about the left's agenda to erase America.
Yep.
It's got a subtext, so maybe you could tell us about erasing America.
Well, you know, the left's goal is to take over this country and turn it into Cuba or North Korea or the former Soviet Union. The left, the hard left in the United States, as you and I know, really represents the international communist movement. To call them leftists or liberals is really fundamentally incorrect. And the left has long been, at least the organized left, the top leaders, most of the rank and file perhaps are not. They're more ideologues and don't really understand or are not privy to the true agenda. But the hard left, the core of the left, is all part of the international communist movement. And the international communist movement has been using, since almost the beginning of the last century, a whole laundry list of different strategies to undermine our country, to fracture our country, and ultimately to make our country collapse. And in the ashes, they will come out of the woodwork to take over. That's their agenda. It's always been their agenda. And they've followed it through a variety of pathways. They've gone at us militarily. They've competed with us militarily across the globe in open warfare conflicts, and then third world conflicts where they are gradually taking over real estate across the globe. They've attacked us culturally through cultural Marxism, and the gay rights agenda is included in that, but it's not limited to that. It is all about destroying the Western culture as we understand it, because the Western culture has proven itself to be very effective, and its effectiveness alone is a threat to communist domination, because it provides a much preferable alternative, and they don't like to have that ugly fact tossed in their faces when their patron saint Karl Marx says that communism should work. Of course, we all know it doesn't. Anybody who's been through an Econ 101 class and has even the least bit of sense can recognize immediately the fatal flaws, irreconcilable differences with reality that is at the heart of Marxism. But the ideologues don't care. They see it as a vehicle to obtain power, and that's what they've been using it for. And so the refugee resettlement agenda, in fact, the entire immigration agenda, legal and illegal, is something that was conceived of by the Communist Party, and it was pushed into the United States through legislation promoted largely and almost exclusively by Ted Kennedy, who has been the left's, the communists' best agent in place until his, thank God, death in whenever it was, 2009, I think. And that's really what it is. The refugee resettlement agenda is just another aspect of the left's effort to swamp our country with unrecognizable cultures, people who do not share our belief system, they do not share our culture, they do not share our values, they don't understand what the U.S. Constitution means, they don't understand the concept of Republican government, and they are here basically for, well, some of them are here for jobs, let's be honest about it, and some of them are hardworking people and even patriotic, but a lot of them are here simply because this is a great scam. This is a great place to hang out and get free stuff, and as long as America can provide that free stuff, and as long as Obama and the other communists in this country can keep the open door policy that we have now to immigrants all over the world, legal and illegal, they're going to be flooding in here to take advantage of that.
Well, before Jeff will start with his amazing thoughts and questions, because the left, they are all the same around the world, okay? I have a question for Jim, because if you write a book like this in Brazil, and way before these immigration things are going on in Europe, and before Trump talked about it, and without any political correctness and so on, all the newspaper here would ask you, when Trump paid you to write this book.
I wish somebody would. You know, I might start being caught up on all my bills.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, it sure would. I wish Trump would pay me for it. Unfortunately, I don't think he has that in mind.
Yeah, I'm saying that because, you know, you said the dream of the left, the dream of communism, the dream of KGB and all the communists around the world is take America over. And we know already that they did it with Hollywood, with the mainstream media, and so on. It's very hard to say the truth. It's very hard to show people what you say right now. So I have been in America for 3 years, almost 3 years. And I was an immigrant there, and I had been very, very respected in America. People knew that I was there for work. I was there for because I believe in freedom, truly freedom, not liberalism, not liberal mentality. And I never got any disrespect. People really welcome there. And I would like to share that with American people. And I have a friend, she went to America very young from Nicaragua. And that time, America was really receiving and welcoming people that used to escape from their country, from their communism and so on. But nowadays, how do you see this situation, Jim? We know very well that people are not escaping from communism to go to America. They are, instead of this, they are going to America with some facilities that we need to see where does that come from, you know, how they are getting this visa so fast, or how they are getting there illegally without any problem. And how do you see that? It's the same way they are escaping from Cuba, they are escaping from socialists, or they are trying to bring this socialism into America.
Well, yeah, and you know, actually a good example of that is the legal immigration program called the Cuban Haitian Entrant Program, which annually allows about 20,000 Cubans to emigrate to the United States legally. Now, if you think about that, there have been an almost unending flood of Cubans choosing to risk their lives to cross the Florida Straits, 90 miles of open water in rickety boats to get here, escaping Cuba. Many have died in the effort, and if you recall, back in the 1990s, the Cuban Air Force shot down 2 American Cubans who were flying little private planes in an effort to help some of those people who were escaping. So it's obvious that Cuba doesn't appreciate people that want to leave Cuba. So why would they allow this Cuban entrant program where 20,000 Cubans are freely allowed to emigrate to the United States? Why would they do that? Well, I can tell you why, knowing what I know about communist governments in general and the Cuban government in particular. They have a visceral hatred for our country, and the people that they let come here are people who are going to serve their agenda to destroy this country in one way or the other. One of the ways I see it happening, you can see it happening overtly, is how the Miami Cuban community has become much less stridently anti-Castro. Now, some of that is result of simply, children, generations of away from the original people who fled Cuba. They kind of forget, and they sort of pass off their parents and grandparents as, kind of lunatic ravings when they talk about the Cuban homeland. But that's just sort of a natural process. As you get further down in generations, people forget the horror that they came from. But there's a very separate reason also, and that is because the Miami is being flooded by these Cuban entrants who have a specific job of neutralizing the the hardcore Miami opposition to Castro, and then you can be almost certain that a number of those are going to be sleeper agents in place to accomplish some kind of nefarious activity at some point in the future when they're called on to do so.
Yeah, nefarious activity like infiltrating the conservative Cubans,
right,
and guiding them in the wrong direction, or destroying the reputations of good anti-communists in the community.
That's what they're doing now, yes.
Yeah.
And then also, there has to be some that are coming in here that are actually trained intelligence agents who are here to penetrate the government, or here to set up sleeper cells who will just be an on-the-ground army when and if needed.
Well, I'm used to say here in Update Brazil, Jim, in our last episodes, that sometimes when people are talking about communism, we don't know if they are talking about Brazil indeed, or if they are talking about their country. Last week we spoke with a Romanian girl, and when she was talking about the communism agenda over there, I said, well, I don't know if you're talking about Brazil or Romania, because look at this picture here. So this is Dilma Rousseff, okay, with Castro, and it's already proved that we have many of Cuban agents here as doctors. So Brazil made a deal with Cuba, bringing a lot of doctors to work in our health care here in Brazil. So Brazil give the money to the government of Cuba, and Cuba will pay, supposed to be, right, they supposed to be paying these doctors back, but that doesn't happen at all, of course, right? Because we know already what is the communism, but people already realize it there in Brazil, and now the Congress is trying to bring this topic, in making a research, investigation, a strongly investigation about it. And the army already said these doctors, most of them are not doctors at all. They are just agents. So I just would like to share this, because sometimes when you talk about communism, because they work all the same way in everywhere, so we don't know if you are talking about, when you say what happened in Cuba, in Miami, in America, we don't know if you're talking about Brazil or America. It's all the same way.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
They use. It's a whole menu of tactics that they apply to countries just based on, what they view to be the most effective for that particular country, that location, that time. They vary their tactics and strategies all the time, but it's all comes out of the same playbook. It's all subversion.
Yeah.
One form or another.
Talking about the subversion, the thing, Jim, that surprised me in your book was the use of Christian organizations and charitable organizations as partners in this whole thing, and how lucrative this actually is for some of them. It's quite surprising to me that there's money in helping refugees get here.
Well, that was all a consequence of the 1980 Refugee Act, significantly authored by Teddy Kennedy, with help from none other than the addled Joe Biden, and passed by Jimmy Carter. So right there, you have to just groan and feel upset to your stomach, knowing that there's things that are viciously anti-American embedded in it automatically, just by nature of who the authors are. So what they did was they took those charitable organizations, Catholic Charities, Lutheran social services. Well, actually, that didn't even exist before 1980. But they took these Christian and actually a Jewish Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society organizations that were doing charitable work using tithe dollars, their own money, to help refugees, genuine charity work, and turned them into government contractors. And those government contractors, the Christian ones, wrapped themselves in the mantle of compassion for refugees and the mantle of good intentions, and then they appeal to the Christian mindset by saying, well, we're bringing in a lot of Muslims and we're going to evangelize them. No, they're not. It's illegal. They cannot do that. As federal contractors, they are not allowed to evangelize anybody. They're federal contractors. They make huge amounts of money to bring in refugees. And what has happened with all of those quote-unquote Christian and Jewish organizations, just like the foundations, just like the media, just like Hollywood, just like so much of our government infrastructure, they've been thoroughly penetrated and saturated by the left, which has turned their good intentions into a malevolent, self-serving agenda where, as we know, one of the left's left's first goal is raw power. Their second goal is unearned wealth. Those are the two only goals. They're not legitimate, but they're the only true goals that the left has: power and wealth for itself, to the exclusion of anyone and everyone else. That is their entire agenda. And so what's happened in these religious organizations, and the Catholic Charities and U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops are the worst offenders, actually. They make, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops made $500 million resettling refugees in 2014. $500 million, and they're on track to do the same this year, and they will do much more next year now that Obama has raised the cap on refugees from 70,000 to 85,000 for 2016 and to 100,000 for 2017. I can tell you all of these religious charities, including the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which now brings in more Muslims than practically anyone, are slavering, they're drooling over the prospects of increasing their revenue streams by a third, a half, or more.
Let me tell you something. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something about Brazil, Jane. The National Conference of Bishops in Brazil, in 1983 or 1984, if I'm not wrong, they started in a church called, I think it's San Damian. San Damian Church in São Paulo. They started a new party called Workers' Party. They showed their icons, okay, their saints, their patrons. Lula, Leonardo Boff is the theologian, heretic, condemned by the church, but promoted by the Catholics here in Brazil. And this Workers' Party was created by bishops. Most of them. Yeah, most of the creators are bishops. And they created this Workers' Party. Is the party that is ruling Brazil right now, is destroying Brazil for many years. The party that created the Foro de São Paulo with Castro. The party who is feeding all the communist country government in South America and Central America and Caribbean. And as far as we can see, most of the bishops that here in Brazil are helping the immigration. Of course, they don't know very well what is going on, but some of them are really knowing what is going on. And look at this picture. The mayor of São Paulo, he's a Workers' Party, okay? He's a member, Workers' Party member. So he's the mayor of the biggest city in Brazil, one of the biggest cities in the world. He made a deal with Tião Viana. He's the governor of Acre. It's a state here in Brazil. Both of them, okay, both works for Workers' Party, and they assist the entry of more than 2,000 Haitians in Brazil. So the crazy thing is Tião Viana recognizing an interview with CBN. It's a really famous and big talk radio in Brazil. He recognizing this interview, which many come from conflict areas. He recognized that many of these Haitians come from conflict areas. Okay, so there is a possibility that they can be, of course, not possibility, but they really know what is a war. They really know what is a conflict. And this governor, he said, it's not my responsibility. They are coming from conflict areas. This is federal policy responsibility. It's not mine as a governor. So, plus than this, drugs and weapons are seized by the federal policy in MST camp. MST camp is a movement in Brazil that works to invade lands. Believe me or not, there is a group, a legal group, that is allowed to invade lands in Brazil, invade private property.
The doing that here. The APLM are doing that.
So, yeah, so in this MST camp, they found drugs, weapons. Do you know who support these MST camp? most of our bishops, our Catholic bishops in Brazil, most of them, the majority, okay, it's not just a few of them. The majority of bishops are helping this MST camp, and this MST camp is named by Lula like his army. For example, when we had this protest in Brazil, we made three of the biggest, the three of the biggest manifestation that we did in Brazil was in this year, in Brazilian history. And after this, Lula said, we need to put our army on the street. He said that, and he was pointing the MST camp. So do you see the connection? It's very likely.
Well, you know, when they first, I forget the name of the Peruvian priest who basically fronted the idea, but liberation theology spread through South America and Central America, Catholicism like wildfire, and it's the reason that so many priests in Central and South America, and I'm thinking of El Salvador in particular, you know, aided and abetted the Castro-backed communist insurgents in those countries, and you know, some of them died as a result at the hands of death squads, but they were aiding and abetting communist insurgents. That's what they were doing. And so that liberation theology justified the left's involvement in the Catholic religion, and it justified the priests' involvement in communist movements. But many of the priests were on their way there already. The Jesuits in particular have always sort of trended that way. But that was also a KGB concoction. That was a liberation theology was an invention of the Soviet KGB, and it was inserted in Central and South America to undermine Catholic religion, which, as we know, up to that point, had been one of the biggest bulwarks against communism.
Sure.
And so that was their strategy for introducing that. And now the Catholic Church, right up to the Pope, has been captured by that ideology, even though the rank and file Catholics throughout the world, the United States, throughout the world, they're shocked to hear that, first of all, and then second of all, most of them retain their traditional conservatism, but they don't realize how they are being manipulated by the leadership of the Catholic Church.
Sure. Jeff?
Yeah, it's the use of religion is, and I think there's a little bit of an echo here. The use of religion, particularly Christianity, to subvert the society is a phenomenon that's particularly disturbing, and I've seen it within the church I belong to here in the United States, the Presbyterian Church, where they're taking positions that the communists were formulating, and that they were
totally
advocating policies. Yeah.
Totally unbiblical.
Yeah.
I mean, the Episcopal Church abandoned the Bible, basically. The Episcopal Church has abandoned Christianity. It's no longer a Christian religion. It's not a religion. It's a political, ideological movement.
Yeah, and so much, and it's coming from within the democratic organization of church government. It seems to be easier to penetrate, and it seems that they go right for the power centers. The communists seem to go for the power centers. They go for the celebrity. They go for the communications controls, right. and they get control of policy. They get control of doctrine, and the next thing you know, it's amazing. The people are sheep. they just seem to go along with it. Nobody objects. Nobody says anything. If somebody says anything, oh, it's just so terrible, they should just shut up. You know, and this is what we've seen, the passivity of people in the face of this. And of course, this refugee thing, I'm frankly surprised that people are objecting to. Trump is kind of a phenomenon, but maybe finally, when people realize that they're going to be have refugee camps with angry Muslims in them nearby, and believe you me, I've had to deal with some Muslims, and they hate. Some of them really hate us, and they hate conservatives. They hate Christians. They hate people who believe in America. They hate America. They want to change America into part of the caliphate. And the thing that's really disturbing is to take in hundreds of thousands of Muslims. 75% of this refugee group coming into Europe is men of military age. What's that about?
And most of them aren't even Syrians. There's so much to that. But I will say I disagree with you somewhat on people being sheep and people seemingly or lackadaisical about it. That's not my experience. My experience is that people are frustrated beyond comprehension. They feel powerless. Now, the folks, the rank and file who just watch the 6 o'clock news and go back to the ball game and have never been involved in politics, many of them are maybe fall into the sheep category. But even those people, everybody recognizes at one level or another that things are not right. And but for so long, they feel powerless to do anything because the media erects a wall of a virtually impenetrable wall of misinformation that it's extremely, and for people who don't get it, and for people who want to stay in their shell, they want to keep their head in the sand, you're really inconveniencing them to tell them the truth. So you're facing not only a institutional wall of misinformation, deliberate misinformation, along with a concerted effort at vilifying anybody who challenges that misinformation, but a group of people who don't want to be disturbed. They don't want to have to face reality because it means they're going to have to get off their rear ends and do something. But my experience is that there is a lot of unrest in America, and it's because they feel powerless and because they feel betrayed. And they are betrayed by our leaders every single day. We are betrayed. And, as a person who has been actively involved in fighting these battles, I can see how it becomes really easy to be discouraged. The left has, unbeknownst to most people, even though the left always screams poverty and points at these wealthy capitalist imperialists who take all our money, they kind of neglect to mention that most of the capitalist imperialists are on their side now. Most of them are now crony capitalists, and they are perfectly happy to fund Obamacare. They're perfectly happy to engage in public-private partnerships where the senior partner is always the government, always dictating where the money goes, and as long as it goes into the pockets of the corporate leaders, they don't really care. So you have this unprecedented level of public corruption. You have this unprecedented level of public betrayal. You have this unprecedented level of misinformation and flat-out lies being conducted by our mass media, followed with a concerted effort in Hollywood to mainstream those lies by popularizing the narratives in movies and music. And people feel really powerless. And when we try to do things, we get undermined almost all the time. We have some successes. I know some folks who have become very effective at defeating mosque proposals. They've been effective at challenging refugee resettlement in their communities. But these are people who, they're doing this on their own time, on their own dime, after they get home from work, neglecting their children, neglecting their families, working till 10 or 11 or 12 at night on this stuff. It's exhausting. And the official federal, state, and local officials resist them heavily, with the rare exception of the principled politician that gets in there and actually wants to help, and that's a very rare exception.
I can't resist mentioning the headline that I saw yesterday in the controversy here in the United States over the statements that were criticized for being anti-Islamic about, involving Ben Carson and Donald Trump about Islam. Ben Carson had said that no, you can't have a Muslim being president because he has to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution, and Muslims believe in Sharia law, and that the two things can't go together. And there was a sort of an uproar over this. And I saw a USA Today headline yesterday was that half of Americans think that a Muslim president is fine. I mean, are we to believe this or not? I mean, the propaganda and the claiming that, you're a bigot if you don't want Muslim refugees in the United States is extremely strong in this country. And of course, not wanting to mix cultures up together where you're going to have a civil war in 20 years, where the Muslims and the Christians are going to be at each other's throats, like in India, or like in the Middle East, or like in the Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Maybe you could comment on this little controversy.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting story. There was a settlement of Muslims and Christians from Burma in Salt Lake City. And in 2008, one of the Muslims raped a 7-year-old Christian girl they were living in the same community, in the same apartment complex. They had all been relocated from Burma together, and this Muslim brutally raped and murdered this 7-year-old girl. She was a Burmese Christian refugee. He was a Burmese Muslim refugee. And they had placed them all in this apartment complex. Interestingly, when they were removed, the refugee camp that had been set up in Burma kept the Muslims in one camp and the Christians in another, because they had no illusions about what would happen if they were mixed. And that's not an exception. The Muslims in Germany, the refugee locations in Germany, the Christians there say they're like prisoners. They are treated very poorly. They are treated like slaves, and many of them say they want to go back to Syria because of the way they're treated by the Muslims in those places. It's not an anomaly. The people, the Muslims that came here years ago and settled in the United States came here to participate in our republic, participate and become useful, productive citizens. We've seen that even those, like for example, the Muslim guy who was a news anchorman in New York, beheaded his wife because he got angry at her for some reason. Even those people can go off the rails. But many of the Muslims that came here, for legitimately, shall we say, came here to assimilate and become part of our country. They're not the problem. The ones that are coming here now are people who have traditionally strongly held these beliefs, and it's one of the huge reasons why the Middle East is such a cesspool and has been such a cesspool for so long. These people can't get over themselves. They fight all the time, and so we are bringing in a community that is already toxic, and then we're just placing it here. You know, what was it? 1/5 of Syrians believe that ISIS is a positive force in the world. 4/5 of the Syrian refugees still say that Israel is their #1 enemy. I mean, come on. These people who are supposedly fleeing for their lives, they're holding these kinds of extremist opinions, and we're supposed to say, oh, welcome, welcome, come to America and enjoy our wonderful lifestyle, when they think our lifestyle is worthy of being overthrown. It's insane. And there's nothing the matter with recognizing the truth about the situation, the truth about the cultures, and that does not detract in any way from saying that there are Muslims that are principled, Muslims with integrity, Muslims that I would trust with my life. But the culture in many of these countries is toxic. You know, we have, for example, we have Hosni Mubarak, who has gone against the grain. Egypt went against the grain of the Muslim community for decades, and they took immense amounts of heat for that. They were incredibly brave and incredibly loyal. And what happens? We get President Obama, who deliberately goes to the Middle East to undermine and destroy that country and install instead the people that the Egyptians have been fighting since the 40s, the Muslim Brotherhood. That is a sick, insane policy. So the Egyptians, good for them, decided that the Muslim Brotherhood wasn't what they wanted, and the military went in and threw them out. And the Egyptian leaders are now going around to Saudi Arabia and some of the other less insane states and saying, listen, this guy Obama is not on our side. He's on the side of the Islamists. He's on the side of the radicals who want to, you know, destroy our country, our way of life, and turn it into a medieval dictatorship.
Jeff, what about United Nations? You mentioned Obama. What about United Nations?
Well, do you want me to respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, here's where the left comes back in again. And I'm getting a bit of a echo. In 1976, the UN Conference on Human Settlements set the agenda for future resettlement policy throughout the world. And like everything the UN does, as Jeff knows, the UN Charter, the development of the UN Charter was overseen by Alger Hiss, one of the most infamous traitors and Soviet agents in our country's history. It was overseen. Harry Truman sent him to head up that delegation, and he oversaw the writing of the UN Charter. So the UN was conceived and was designed to be an instrument of Soviet foreign policy from the beginning. It was not designed to be a world body that that handled national disputes and resolved world problems. It hasn't resolved a single problem. It's created many, many problems, and all of that serves the foreign policy of the communist countries. They didn't have the power to take as much control as they have in the beginning, because the United States came out of World War II pretty much on top of everything and could call a lot of the shots. But that doesn't change what the fundamental goal was. And it took very little time for the so-called non-aligned movement to come out of the formation of the UN. And as we all know, the non-aligned movement of, hundreds of third world nations were not non-aligned at all. They were aligned universally with the Soviet Union and aligned universally against the United States. So non-aligned was a total misnomer. But anyway, so in 1976 they set settlements policy, and settlements policy was, A, private property needed to be outlawed, because something as important as property couldn't be left in private hands. It had to be in the hands of the government. And that settlements policy should focus on equity and social justice, meaning the West needed to redistribute income, wealth, resources, and open our doors to populations throughout the world, so that those populations who formerly were unfairly left out of the affluence that Americans enjoyed unfairly could now participate, and that wealth could be redistributed to them. And that is the real refugee resettlement agenda. It is to resettle foreign populations in the third world, all over the world, to the United States, to redistribute our income and wealth to those populations. Now, of course, that's going to destroy us. It's going to collapse the world economy eventually. But the Soviets and the Communist Chinese and their allies have always been about conquest. So that's what their goal is. And you can see that same UN settlements policy in what Obama is doing right now with the Housing and Urban Development Department in locating low-income housing in affluent areas. Just a different aspect of that same settlements policy, which the UN urged all nations to adopt back in 1976, and 4 years later we had the Refugee Act of 1980.
So you put an angry foreign mob close to the wealthiest people in the community so that they have access to looting their wealth at a moment's notice. You get a flash mob and you come after them.
Right, and it also makes that wealth not quite so valuable. I mean, what happens to property values when a beautiful piece of property is sited next to a drug rehab center, or or a Section 8 housing complex is dumped right next door with all its attendant problems? It destroys property values. And that, the left, in their insane way of looking at things, is achieving social justice.
Jim, before we finish, I would like you talking about these three pictures we want to show now. This is a really good information, and I would like you talking with our audience, explaining some of this research you did. So the first one is the immigration. Oh, hold on. Let me see here. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
So immigration, refugee, resettlement, gender.
Yep. Okay, so for the left, and there's an echo again. I don't know if you can fix it. For the left, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution. A leftist, 60s leftist radical said that. And what he meant was that all issues, whether it's immigration, gay rights, welfare, civil rights, any agenda you can think of, it is only supported by the left because it is a vehicle for them to obtain the two things they want: wealth and power. And they want absolute total power. They want a despotic country. They want a communist country with them in charge. Immigration and refugee agenda perfectly is one of those issues that really works to their advantage, because it dilutes American culture, and we forget who we are. If we forget who we are, forget where we came from, we will not have a clue where we're going, and that provides a very good opportunity for the left to step in and guide, which they're only too happy to do. It sucks up welfare resources. The immigrant and refugee community uses more welfare resources than American citizens do on a per capita basis. They suck up enormous amounts of welfare, and it's open-ended. And that's a Cloward-Piven strategy. If you've heard of Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, their crisis strategy calls for an overwhelming welfare system by packing it with so many people that the entire system collapses. And the other agendas, the other benefits to the left listed there, all serve to help them obtain their ultimate goal, which is power and wealth. And here's just a perfect demonstration on this table of what I mean. There are dozens of grants that refugees can get to help them become self-sufficient. But after 5 years, despite all these grants, which includes a dollar-for-dollar savings account matching grant, can you imagine? You can save up to $2,000 and the government will pay you dollar for dollar to do that, giving you up to $2,000 free dollars of free money. I wish I could get that. But despite all of these supposedly independence-producing grants, most refugees remain on the dole even after 5 years. So for this chart, and it comes right out of the Office of Refugee Resettlement, I figured that the dollar costs, but the percentages are correct. 56% of the refugees are still on Medicaid or something they call refugee medical assistance, which they get for the first 8 months they come here. Cash assistance, 47%. Food stamps, 74%. Public housing, 23%. And that's after 5 years. And that's just one example of how refugees suck up welfare resources. It's actually worse than that. With some Iraqis that are here, 90% of them remain on welfare. Welcoming America, and this is where we get into the left's that reflects the true evil nature that the left embodies. Welcoming America is an organization, a nationwide organization with 16 right now. It's gone down to 16 statewide organizations and partnerships with cities in 33 different states. And the idea is to create this welcoming narrative for refugees and immigrants. And it wasn't created by Obama, but Obama has created something called the Task Force on New Americans, and their agenda is welcoming communities and fully integrating immigrants and refugees. And the job of proselytizing Americans to accept that is the job of welcoming America. And the idea is to force Americans to accept mass immigration. And their method of doing this they call culture shaping. This is like a sleazy, creepy Orwellian term they've come up with, and it's basically to manipulate the American mind by discrediting anybody who opposes this agenda as racists, xenophobes, nativists. That's their new favorite term. We're all nativists if we don't like bringing in third world cultures that will erase our vastly superior culture. And their idea is to create good receiving communities. And this is a direct quote from the person who founded Welcoming America, that we must recognize the role everyone must play in furthering the integration of recent immigrants. No, everyone must not play that role. It astounds me how arrogant the left is when they talk about these things. Everyone must do what they want. They're compulsively despotic. And if you want to see how bad it could be, if you think it's bad now, just wait till we find out what happens if these people get their goal of the permanent progressive majority. Because that's not just going to be the rantings of some overpaid non-profit leader who's given money by George Soros. That's going to be the narrative that everybody's going to have to accept and swallow or face serious consequences.
The loss of America, the destruction of our freedom, the introduction of political correctness and absolute dictatorship. Yes, a communist state. That seems to be where all this is heading, and I sure hope that people are up in arms about it and are going to resist this kind of thing. And Jim, I want to thank you for coming. I just put his book up there. You can find it on Amazon. You can order it. Definitely get a hold of this book. This will show you what's going on and who's participating in this whole agenda. And I want to thank you, Jim, for being with us today on our show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you bet. And
yeah, it's a great pleasure, Jim. Thank you very much. And I hope we can do more. You can come more times here in Update Brazil and share more and more information. I know you have so much to say, and we have so much desire to hear that from you in this amazing book. Thank you, Jeff, again. Thank you, everyone is watching us, and make sure you will like this video and share this with your friends. Okay? So this is one more Update Brazil. I'll see you guys on next Friday. Thank you very much, you all.
Okay. All right.